showed himself in this way. Gathered there together were Simon Peter, Thomas called the twin, Nathanael of Cana in Galilee, the sons of Zebedee, and 2 others of his disciples. Simon Peter said to them, "I'm going fishing." They said to him, "We will go with you." They went out, got into the boat, but that night they caught nothing. Just after daybreak, Jesus stood on the beach, but the disciples did not know that it was Jesus. Jesus said to them, "Children, you have no fish, have you?" They answered him, "No." He said to them, "Cast the net to the right side of the boat, and you will find some." So they cast it, and now they were not able to haul it in because there were so many fish. That disciple whom Jesus loved said to Peter, "It is the Lord." When Simon Peter heard that it was the Lord, he put on some clothes, for he was naked, and jumped into the sea. But the other disciples came in the boat, dragging the net full of fish, for they were not far from the land, only about 100 yards off. When they had got ashore, they saw a charcoal fire there, with fish on it, and bread. Jesus said to them, "Bring some of the fish that you have just caught." So Simon Peter went aboard and hauled the net ashore, full of large fish, 153 of them. And though there were so many, the net was not torn. Jesus said to them, "Come and have breakfast." Now none of the disciples dared to ask him, "Who are you?" because they knew it was the Lord. Jesus came and took the bread and gave it to them and did the same with the fish. This was now the 3rd time that Jesus appeared to the disciples after he was raised from the dead. When they had finished breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" He said to him, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." Jesus said to him, "Feed my lambs." A second time he said to him, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" He said to him, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." Jesus said to him, "Tend my sheep." He said to him the 3rd time, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" Peter felt hurt because he said to him the 3rd time, "Do you love me?" And he said to him, "Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you." Jesus said to him, "Feed my sheep. Very truly I tell you, when you were younger, you used to fasten your own belt and to go wherever you wished. But when you grow old, you will stretch out your hands, and someone else will fasten a belt around you and take you where you do not wish to go." He said this to indicate the kind of death by which he would glorify God. After this, he said to him, "Follow me." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Christ.
Does it seem at all odd to you to find the disciples off fishing in this morning's gospel reading? Yes, certainly many of them were fishermen before they met Jesus, and they are back home in a boat on the Sea of Galilee, their old stomping grounds. I'm talking about timing, though. It seems like just yesterday, or last week anyway, they were still in Jerusalem, having gone through the most painful days of their lives, through Jesus' arrest, trial, and crucifixion, and then through the shock and surprise of the resurrection and his appearances, first to Mary, then to all of them, not just once, but twice, while they were huddled in that upper room. But now in John's Gospel, they're suddenly back in Galilee, fishing. Even though in that upper room, Jesus blessed them, breathed on them the Spirit, and sent them. Are they still uncertain about what Jesus expects of them? Or maybe taking a little bit of time before they head off to their ministries? Who could blame them? Their lives had changed in an instant. They had lost their leader, the one who took them away from their everyday occupations and into an amazing adventure of teaching and healing, of new ways of understanding a relationship with God, and of turning the world upside down. Why not go back home to Galilee for a time, the place where the adventure began? We might picture these disciples, lost and perplexed, wandering aimlessly, wondering what to do, what will happen next. Even though Jesus was clear that they were to carry on, that they will be equipped to do so, they wonder what will happen now that he is no longer walking beside them day after day, when he is no longer there to touch the eyes of the blind and return them to sight, no longer there to sit at the table and break bread with them and with the outcasts of society. How will they continue to experience Jesus' presence? Or will they? Has it all been real or just some kind of a dream that is over now? How are they to carry on his work, spread his teachings and his love to others? In the midst of that confusion, Peter says, "I'm going fishing." And the rest of the guys jump on board. It's something to do, something to take their minds off of all the questions. It's something familiar and normal. After all, it was Peter's trade and that of some of the others until Jesus came along and changed their lives. This story is just chock full of images, isn't it? It's an engaging scene. Early morning on the water, the stillness and beauty of dawn, a glorious sunrise maybe. There are sounds too, the lapping of water against the hull of the fishing boat, the nets dragging in the sea, maybe the heavy breathing of the fishermen who are hauling and repositioning their nets. And then the wisp of a smell, the odor of a fire and cooking fish. It's a story of curious things too. For example, why did these disciples not recognize that stranger on the beach who called to them? Jesus had so recently appeared to them, and they didn't immediately recognize him then either. Now, here is a stranger on the shore telling the fishermen how to do their jobs. It's a wonder they didn't tell him to mind his own business. They were the professionals, after all. This is a miracle story, too, one of abundance. A net that is suddenly filled with fish after a long night of catching nothing. A night when going back to what was familiar just wasn't working for them until the stranger on the shore told them to try again on the other side of the boat. There are echoes, of course, of other times. We remember a similar abundant catch when Jesus first met them and called them away from their boats to follow him and be fishers of people. We might remember other miracles too, like the feeding of the 5,000 hungry people with just 12 loaves and 2 fish, that happened very near to this place, not all that long ago. It's a story of forgiveness and reconciliation. Remember how the last time Peter was near an open fire, he denied Jesus 3 times and ran away before the crucifixion. Here Peter is asked 3 times, "Do you love me?" He's brought back into Jesus' fold before being sent out to become the foundation of the church and to feed the sheep. It's a story of inclusion. The net full of fish is straining but not breaking with the load. The small fish are not slipping through the mesh. The large, or especially live fish, are not tearing out an escape hole. All are held and accounted for, and it takes every bit of the disciples' strength to drag that net into the beach. This comes back to us in the dialogue between Jesus and Peter. Notice that Jesus did not say, "Feed some of my sheep. Feed only those with white fleece, or only those rams with curly horns." He said, "Feed my sheep, all of them, without qualification. Black and white, striped and solid, blonde, brunette, and redheaded, gay and straight, Asian, African, European." That's what those 153 captured in the net without breaking it is all about. Community and unity, inclusion. Feed my sheep, Jesus said, all of them. It's a story of community, of Jesus breaking bread once again with his friends. It reminds us that sitting at a table and eating with all kinds of people was one of Jesus' favorite things. This time, for the disciples, it is not in an upper room in Jerusalem. It is not in the dining room of Mary and Martha in Bethany. It's a barbecue breakfast on the beach of the Sea of Galilee, back home where the story began. It's a story of recognition as the risen Christ makes himself known yet again to his friends, not in some mystical, out-of-body way, but right in the midst of the ordinary, back in familiar territory. Maybe the disciples thought it was all over and that they could escape the hard commitments they had made to this Jesus person. Maybe they were even a bit relieved to be done with the wandering, the conflicts, not knowing where their next meal would come from or where they might sleep at night. But here he was. Jesus was back, at least for the moment, intruding into that space. Jesus was back to make certain they understood their marching orders, because now it was all up to them. For it's also a story of sending, or more accurately, resending. Peter is reminded that he will be taken to places he would rather not go, that he and others must commit their very lives to the feeding and tending of people far beyond that familiar Galilee, that those who give their lives and those who will live to tell the story all have roles to play in spreading the news, carrying the vision of God's realm to the ends of the earth, in word and in deed. There are so many messages for us in this one small story. But what stands out for me today is how the disciples went back home, for a time anyway. Sometimes we do that, don't we, when something happens to change or to shake our world. Now and then, I ponder what I will do when I retire. Where will I go? What will it be like? Frankly, it's quite terrifying to me. One fantasy I've had is to go back to Chicago, go back to St. Luke's as part of the clergy team and assist like I did before I came here to Grace. Since I'm quite a bit older than the rector that I worked with, I figured that she would be there for quite a while longer. But then, surprise, she retired last week. I attended her last service. And my other two cronies are gone too. One died, the other moved off to Portland, Oregon. I suppose it is possible that I could still go back if the new rector would want me, but it would not be the same. It can never be the same. I will have to find another path. It's fine to go back to the familiar for a little while, to remember, to gather oneself before stepping out into the unknown, but just for a little while. I'm betting that the disciples told stories on the road back to Galilee and out on that boat, remembering the things that had happened, things that were remarkable and those that were ordinary, the special moments and the hard ones. And it was in the midst of the ordinary that they smelled that fish frying on the beach and heard that voice telling them where to put the net and recognized that Jesus was among them again to nudge them forward. Jesus cooking them breakfast, serving them, once again breaking bread with them as he had so many times, sharing the gifts of food and being together to nourish their bodies and their souls, preparing themselves for a new day. As we must, even when the new paths we encounter may not come with a workbook or a syllabus. Still, like the disciples, we must be ready to be surprised, for it is in times that seem most uncertain and perplexing that Christ breaks through and we know his presence. Often in ways we do not expect, resurrection takes place in our gatherings, in our joy, in our sorrow, in our breaking bread together. And we are never alone. The good news for the church and for all of us is that Peter and the guys accepted Jesus' challenge. Very soon, they went forth to feed his sheep, to teach and to heal and to equip others to do the same. And so it has been through the centuries, generation after generation, feeding the sheep and teaching and calling others to carry on and on and on. Jesus cooked the breakfast that morning, grilled fish, fragrant and inviting, were ready for the disciples when they brought the boat to the shore. And then Jesus invited them to add fish from their abundant catch. We too are invited to add our fish, ourselves, to the feast of life, to eat until we are filled and then to go forth to share it to the ends of the earth, to all the sheep. May it be so. May we be fed and surprised. Amen.